Preface. The Lucky One. Today is July 30th. With the indoor temperature averaging 30 degrees Celsius, Aoi had no choice but to let the poor electric fan, which had been running non-stop for 5 days and nights, continue its grueling work. It seemed the fan was starting to wear out. Aoi couldn't pinpoint exactly when, but at some point, it began making a whining noise, like it was protesting. He swore that when he bought it 5 days ago, there was absolutely no sign of this peculiar, complaining sound. Nagoya, 40 to 41.1 degrees Celsius. Shizuoka, 40 to 41 degrees Celsius. Yokohama, 39 to 40 degrees Celsius. The female announcer on the TV calmly reported these shocking temperatures, her soft voice in stark contrast to the terrifying numbers. It made people feel as though the earth was slowly turning into mercury. Then, rumble. A deafening roar suddenly surged in through the window, drowning out every sound in the room, asserting itself as if it owned the space. Aoi didn't flinch. He remained seated on the sofa, staring blankly at a slip of paper and a bank card on the coffee table before him. It was just the sound of another airplane taking off. He was used to it by now, as he heard it once or twice a day. While it used to bother him, he'd long since grown accustomed to the noise. After all, his apartment was right next to Tokyo's only major airport. This brings us to how Aoi ended up living in this place, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment of about 70 square meters. It wasn't a rental, he actually owned it. Yes, his name was on the deed. But he didn't buy it himself. In fact, he couldn't afford it. He was just an ordinary guy, fresh out of college, without the means to purchase a home. And no, his parents didn't buy it for him either. Aoi had grown up in an orphanage with other kids. Life was fine. Except for the dorm-style living arrangements, it wasn't much different from the way normal children lived. He had enough to eat, enough to wear, and received a proper education, which left him with a pretty favorable view of the country. That said, he did have a particular passion, anime. For Aoi, and for many other kids in the orphanage, anime was more than entertainment, it was like a friend and a teacher all in one. It gave them, each with their own sad backgrounds, a way to connect with one another. Among all the shows, Naruto was the most beloved. It's easy to see why. Naruto, the main character, was also an orphan. But let's get back on track. The apartment Aoi now lived in wasn't something he bought, nor was it given to him by his parents. He had inherited it from an old man he met a year ago, shortly after graduating from college. The old man, who was over 80 years old, claimed to have no family, no wife, no children. So, before he passed, he decided to leave all his belongings to a fated person. The catch. Aoi had to be his surrogate son until he passed away. When Aoi asked why he'd been chosen, the old man simply looked at him with a complicated expression and said, "You're easy on the eyes." At first, Aoi didn't believe it. He was a rational adult, and his first instinct was that this was some kind of scam. But when his name legally appeared on the property deed, and nearly 60,000 yen was deposited into his bank account, he couldn't deny it any longer. For the next 5 months, Aoi became the old man's son, staying by his side until he took his last breath. Sure, Aoi could have taken the money and the house and left without a second thought. But he didn't. He couldn't bring himself to do something that heartless. So, for 5 months, instead of looking for a job, he stayed home and listened to the old man recount stories from his military days. Aoi didn't even know how to cook, but he bought recipe books and learned to make meals. When the old man wanted fruit, Aoi would get up early to buy the freshest produce from the morning market. Sometimes, when the boredom was too much, he would sing, even though the only songs he knew were theme songs from anime. The old man didn't understand a word, but he always listened with a smile. In the final 2 months, the old man became bedridden and refused to go to the hospital, insisting it was a waste of money. So, Aoi made porridge every day and fed it to him, spoonful by spoonful. When some spilled, he'd carefully wipe it up. But the hardest part was dealing with the old man's declining physical state. He could no longer go to the bathroom on his own, and sometimes accidents happened. It was difficult for Aoi, and there were many times he thought about walking away. But every time he saw the old man's cloudy eyes, he swallowed his frustration and pushed through. To this day, he still isn't sure if he stuck around because of the apartment and money, or because he'd genuinely come to see the old man as a father figure. Now, why was Aoi sitting on the couch, staring at a slip of paper and a bank card? The reason might make you laugh. He'd been sitting there all night. The slip of paper was a check. A check with a 1, followed by 7 zeros. No, this wasn't part of the inheritance from the old man. He'd earned it. In fact, it had only taken him less than 48 hours. Sounds impressive, right? But it's really nothing special. Anyone could do it, as long as they win the first prize in the lottery. Yep, the check in front of him was the prize from the national lottery. As for the bank card, well, that was even simpler. The 8-figure sum on the check was now safely deposited in his account. What the hell is going on with me? Why is this so ridiculous? You just buy a random lottery ticket and win. Okay, fine, I won. So what? It's just the first prize. The first prize, though. And I actually got it. All night long, these kinds of thoughts kept swirling through Aoi's mind in different variations. He simply couldn't wrap his head around how lucky he was. Wait a minute. The sound of the plane had long since faded, and Aoi's mind started to clear. He glanced around his living room and muttered to himself. Come to think of it. This apartment. It's kind of suspicious how I got it in the first place. Sure, he'd taken care of the old man for 5 months, but did that really balance out the value of a place like this? With luck like this, am I the protagonist of some kind of story? Is my golden finger just ridiculously good fortune? Maybe it was all the anime he'd watched, but Aoi's thoughts began to wander, and before he knew it, a strange idea slipped out of his mouth. What if I wanted to travel through time? To a world with superpowers or something? Check my reading list. New fics are out now, check out my profile reading list to read. 19 comments 0 vote. Chapter 1. Comic version of the Marvel world. Saitama Municipal General Hospital, Japan. Wah. A high-pitched baby cry suddenly filled the pristine delivery room. But just after the nurse finished cutting the umbilical cord, something unusual happened. Crack. A small burst of yellowish electricity flickered from the newborn's body, zapping the nurse's gloves. Within seconds, a large amount of golden electricity surged from the baby's body, lighting up the room in a flash of gold. The entire delivery room was suddenly awash in a bright electrical glow. Despite the shocking display, neither the doctor nor the nurses seemed fazed. They continued their tasks calmly, as if they'd expected something like this to happen. Oddly enough, the electric surge didn't harm anyone or disrupt the medical equipment in the room. It was as if the electricity was entirely under control. Is it a boy or a girl? The black-haired woman lying on the delivery bed, glancing up at the flickering light on the ceiling, asked in a tired voice. Congratulations, it's a very healthy boy. The experienced doctor, recognizing the unspoken question in her eyes, added with a warm, reassuring tone, but you can't touch him just yet, and you'll need to keep your distance. His quirk appears to be lightning-based and quite strong. Without insulated clothing, it could be dangerous. Lightning, huh, just as expected, alright then, she sighed, her disappointment clear, but she understood the situation. Her nerves, strained by the delivery, began to relax, and she quickly grew drowsy. Baby, I'll see you soon. She didn't fight the exhaustion. As the sound of her baby's cry echoed in her ears, she closed her eyes and drifted off into a deep sleep. She was utterly spent. Meanwhile, the nurses expertly placed the newly born Thunderbolt baby into an incubator designed to block electricity. The doctor, wiping his hands, stepped out of the delivery room to speak with the child's father. Inside the incubator, the baby's cries suddenly stopped. Not because he was soothed, but because Aoi the consciousness inside the baby had calmed down. I've time traveled, no, technically I've been reincarnated, as a baby that can discharge electricity. As Aoi processed this, excitement began to rise. I really ended up in a world with superpowers. And they're completely normal here. Earlier, he'd been terrified when the electricity burst out of him, but the casual reaction of the doctors and nurses to his powers told him everything. He didn't know how he'd generated the electricity, but the fact that no one was panicking meant it wasn't out of the ordinary. This was good news. It meant he wouldn't be hunted down or feared as some kind of freak. That was a huge relief, especially since he had no way to protect himself right now. What kind of world is this? As he was wheeled into a room full of other newborns by a gentle nurse, Aoi's mind raced with possibilities. But instead of crying again, he stayed silent, his attention drawn to the strange babies around him. Some of them didn't even look human. There were babies with long horns, tails, and red skin, which were strange but still somewhat human-like. But what was going on with that black and white panda-looking baby? Or the one that looked like a giant ant? Could this be a fantasy world with multiple races? Aoi wondered, his curiosity piqued. But then he reconsidered, looking at the advanced technology around him, the high-tech incubators, the medical equipment, and the cameras mounted on the ceiling. No, this place has to be a sci-fi world. The tech is too advanced for just magic. It's probably a world where superpowers and advanced technology coexist. With the limited information he had, that was the best conclusion Aoi could come to. But one thing was certain, he was excited about the life ahead of him. Here's hoping my luck from the last life carries over. Time flew by, and before long, Aoi had turned 3 years old. However, his new name was no longer Aoi. Now, he was Kaminari Denki. He didn't mind the new name at all. His old name had little meaning to him, and the fact that he now had real parents was something he was immensely grateful for. Over the past 3 years, he had experienced their unwavering love and care. To him, his new name imbued with his parents' hopes and affection was something precious, something to be cherished. Of course, he hadn't spent the past 3 years just basking in familial love. Despite his young age, Aoi, now Kaminari Denki, had been busy gathering information. Since he couldn't do much physically, he'd focused on what he could do, watching, listening, and absorbing everything around him. The TV had become his best source of information. While there was a computer at home, it would have been far too suspicious for a toddler to start typing and searching for information. Even in a world where superpowers were common, being a 3-year-old computer whiz was asking for trouble. He was cautious enough to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. So, what had he learned? First and foremost, superpowers, or quirks, as they were called here, were everywhere. From the moment he was born, he realized that his lightning ability wasn't something unusual in this world. As he grew, he confirmed that he was now living in Japan, his parents were Japanese, and they seemed to live an ordinary life in a parallel version of Earth. While it was a bit unsettling that this wasn't his original world, it was reassuring to know that countries like the United States, China, and Russia still existed. The geography of this world was nearly identical to the one he knew. That was comforting, in a way. He wasn't entirely lost in some unrecognizable place. Even more important was what he'd learned from TV. This world had heroes. And not just a few. Heroes were everywhere, and they were celebrated. This revelation made Kaminari's mind spin with wild possibilities. He had a theory, one that was crazy, but not impossible. This might actually be the Marvel Universe. But with more than just superheroes. Mutants, Inhumans, all sorts of superpowered races, it's all here. Check my reading list. New fics are out now, check out my profile, reading list to read. 14 comments 0 vote. Chapter 2. Hero S and the Guitar. No, this isn't the Marvel world. A 6-year-old blonde boy sat on his mother's lap, staring blankly at the computer screen in front of him. There was a sense of relief, but also a tinge of regret. Up until today, he had been convinced that the world he'd been reincarnated into was a comic book version of the Marvel Universe, where Earth was constantly being ravaged by all sorts of chaos. Although the TV didn't feature any familiar superheroes or supervillains, people here referred to superpowers as quirks. That had confused him for a while. But he dismissed it, thinking it made sense. After all, he was in Japan, not the United States. It wasn't odd that he couldn't spot Spider-Man or Iron Man swinging by on the news. But all of that was shattered today. Today was his first day at Saitama Municipal Elementary School. Since it was the first day, there wasn't much actual teaching. Most of the day was spent getting to know the campus, meeting the homeroom teacher, and receiving a few textbooks. However, their teacher, Rimi Yonekura, gave a brief introduction on the basics of quirks, especially how they originated. Listening to her explanation, Kaminari realized that this world was nothing like the Marvel Universe he'd imagined. His entire understanding had been mistaken. As soon as he got home, he begged his mother to let him use the computer to look up more information on quirks and the world around him. His excuse. He was eager to learn more about the world. His mother, clearly thrilled by his curiosity, complied without hesitation. It's so wonderful to see you so eager to learn on your very first day of school. And so, he finally learned the truth. This wasn't Marvel at all. No mutants, no Iron Man, no Captain America. Even more surprising, the concept of Hero S in this world was vastly different from what he had expected. Here, Hero S were essentially government employees. They got paid for their heroic work, receiving significant rewards from the government for their actions. To be honest, Kaminari found it hard to agree with that idea. In his mind, those people were more like glorified special police officers, not heroes. Perhaps it was his previous life's upbringing that influenced his thinking. To him, the word hero wasn't something just anyone could use. A hero, in his mind, was someone who made great sacrifices for their country or the people without expecting anything in return. That's what he believed a true hero should be. These special police were just good citizens and good public servants, at best, in his opinion. Of course, Kaminari didn't have any extreme thoughts like wanting to change the system or revolt against it. He'd been given a second chance at life, and he wasn't about to waste it by doing something foolish. Instead of fighting against the rules, it was better to adapt. That was the key to living a comfortable life. So, while he was relieved that this wasn't the chaotic Marvel universe, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed that he wouldn't see those familiar heroes he'd grown up with. As Kaminari thought more about the world's background, his mind wandered to an anime he'd watched in his previous life, One Punch Man. That world also had professionalized heroes just like this one. However, after asking his mother to look up the hero rankings, he quickly confirmed that this wasn't One Punch Man's world either. Even though they lived in Saitama City. He was certain because the heroes from One Punch Man didn't exist in the rankings here. For example, the number 1 hero, All Might, didn't exist in that anime at all. Well, with this newfound information, Kaminari finally had a more accurate understanding of the world. Since it wasn't any world he was familiar with, he would have to carefully consider his plans for the future. In this new life, he didn't want to be as ordinary as he had been in his previous one. He remembered a saying from his old world: even if a loser gets a second chance through reincarnation, they're still likely to remain a loser because laziness doesn't change just by traveling through time. Honestly, Kaminari Denki mostly agreed with that statement. But he also believed that nothing was absolute. If out of 100 reincarnated people, 90 remained the same, the remaining 10 might change for the better. Because those 10 wanted to change their fate. Because they didn't want to be the same person they were before. Kaminari believed he was one of those 10 people. He was ready to work hard and transform his life. As for his future plans, it was clear that his quirk was going to be the center of it all. How to train his quirk and make it stronger would definitely be a lifelong pursuit. He'd asked his mother about it, and she explained that his quirk had been officially classified as a discharge ability, meaning he could generate and release electricity. However, it wasn't an infinite power source. He had to charge his body first, storing the energy inside before releasing it. Upon learning this, the first thing he thought about was the most basic yet important question: how could he increase the amount of electricity he could store? But when he asked his mother, she admitted she didn't know. She explained that professional questions about quirks were best left to licensed heroes. She herself had only studied general subjects in high school and hadn't taken any hero courses, so she didn't have that kind of knowledge. But Mom, don't you practice your quirk? Kaminari asked, tilting his head cutely. It wasn't like he was trying to act cute, it's just that as a 6-year-old boy with big, bright eyes and a charming smile, everything he did naturally came across as adorable. In this life, his appearance really was quite disarming. He could only compare it to a human version of a Pikachu. We don't need to practice our quirks. His mother, with her long, straight black hair, looked at him lovingly and explained, the law says that only licensed heroes can use their quirks under certain conditions. For ordinary people like us, it's illegal to use them. Oh, Kaminari nodded, thinking it over. He understood the reasoning behind the rule, it was just about maintaining order and stability. Then how do you get that license? He asked. His mother laughed gently and kissed his forehead. That's something your teachers will explain when you're older. For now, it's far too soon for you to worry about that. Her soft smile widened as she added, what's important for you now is to study hard and take care of your body. Even if I don't know much about quirks, I know that quirks are part of your physical self. Having a strong body will definitely help. Kaminari nodded again. He had to agree with her. He needed to start taking better care of his body. First thing tomorrow, he would start waking up early and go for runs. Alright, it's getting late. You have school tomorrow, so it's time for bed. His mother stood up and switched off the computer, then gently placed him in his bed, a bright yellow crib adorned with lightning bolt patterns. Mom. Just as she was about to turn off the lights and leave, Kaminari called out softly. Yes, sweetie. Can I learn to play the guitar? I really want to learn how to play. Check my reading list. New fics are out now, check out my profile, reading list to read. 17 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Junkdog. Download app now. Chapter 3, Midnight. February, while not quite as lively as March, still brings a hint of renewal. The lawns on both sides of the park are already covered in a fresh, green carpet, though without the layers of delicate flowers, the space feels a bit monotonous. Ha! A young man with blonde hair, streaked with a bolt of black lightning, came to a stop, his chest heaving from the exertion of his run. He approached an ancient tree with a thick, moss-covered trunk, his face shining with sweat. With a deep breath, he inhaled the cool, fragrant air filled with the scent of the park's greenery. Phew! Exhaling a cloud of breath, Kaminari felt his entire body hum with energy. This feeling of taking in fresh air after a run, he never got tired of it. It made every part of him feel alive. No matter how many times I experience this, it never gets old, he murmured, his gaze rising to the ancient cherry blossom trees lining the path. A handsome smile crossed his face, though there was a note of regret in his tone. Looks like the cherry blossoms won't bloom before school starts. This was Omiya Park in Saitama Prefecture, not far from the city where he lived. It was a short subway ride away, and for years, Kaminari had come here to exercise regularly. The thing he loved most about this park were the cherry blossom trees. There were over 1,000 of them, each an old tree with its own history. When March rolled around, the whole park would be bathed in pink, the cherry blossoms filling the air with their subtle fragrance. He remembered the first time he'd come to enjoy the cherry blossoms with his parents. It had left him stunned. On that day, hundreds of families gathered under the blossoms, sharing carefully prepared lunches and drinks. People sang traditional songs, sometimes with friends, sometimes with strangers, and vendors sold treats from stalls they'd set up around the park. It was a lively, vibrant scene. But most days, like today, the park was quiet. Aside from a few elderly folks taking their dogs for a walk, it was rare to see anyone else, especially a 15-year-old like Kaminari. Well, it's almost 6, he muttered, glancing at his watch. He was wearing a black and yellow tracksuit, and a pair of headphones hung around his neck. It was time to head to the subway station. His schedule had been the same for years now: get up at 4:30 a.m., head to the park for a run, and then find a secluded spot to practice and study his quirk. Omiya Park was large, and at this early hour, he could train without anyone noticing. Well, almost no one. There had been one instance where an elderly man walking his Shiba Inu had spotted him experimenting with his quirk. But the man hadn't said a word, only smiled kindly before continuing along the path. Kaminari wasn't too worried. As long as he didn't hurt anyone or himself, nobody was likely to make a fuss. But when he told his mother about his morning runs, he left out the part about practicing his quirk. He didn't want to worry her, so in her mind, he was just a good son who studied hard, exercised regularly, and had a love for music. By now, Kaminari was nearing the park's entrance, less than 200 meters from the subway station. He was about to put on his headphones and enjoy some music on his way home, but he was stopped by the sight of a small crowd gathered ahead, along with the sound of worried voices. Did someone call an ambulance? It's on its way. But it'll take at least 10 minutes to get here. What do we do? He's not breathing. Curious, Kaminari approached and saw an elderly man lying unconscious on the ground, surrounded by several anxious onlookers. A little Shiba Inu stood beside the old man, licking his face in confusion. Wait, isn't that the old man? Kaminari immediately recognized him. It was the same man who had spotted him practicing his quirk not too long ago. He still remembered the kind smile the old man had given him. Excuse me, what happened to him? Kaminari asked, addressing a bald, heavy-set man nearby. But it was a worried woman with purple hair who answered him. We're not sure. He just collapsed out of nowhere. By the time we checked, he wasn't breathing, she said, wringing her hands. The bald man nodded, adding, I called for an ambulance, but they said it'll take at least 10 minutes. We're afraid the old man won't last that long. Kaminari frowned, understanding their concern. Without oxygen, even a few minutes could be fatal, but he didn't have any first aid training. For a moment, he wasn't sure what to do. We need a hero. Is there a hero around here? A younger man in the crowd shouted suddenly, and everyone's attention shifted. Heroes. Yeah. There must be a pro-hero nearby. Someone find a hero. In a society filled with heroes, it was natural for people to think of them in emergencies. But no one here knew how to contact a hero directly, other than through their agency numbers. The issue was, they needed a hero now, not in 10 minutes. Don't worry. A hero is here. Just as the crowd's anxiety peaked, a sultry voice rang out. Before anyone could react, a figure darted past them, moving so quickly that Kaminari barely registered it. That speed, incredible, Kaminari thought, his heart racing. But before he could process the movement, he was hit by a wave of strong perfume, making his head swim slightly. It's midnight. The crowd began to cheer, and someone quickly explained, she's a pro-hero. A teacher at UA High School. Kaminari's eyes focused on the woman kneeling beside the old man. She was checking his vitals with a calm, practiced efficiency. A teacher from UA. He's in cardiac arrest. Midnight's voice was firm and decisive. She wasn't a doctor, but as a senior pro-hero, she had plenty of experience in emergency situations. Without hesitation, she began administering chest compressions, trying to restore the old man's blood circulation. At the same time, she gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, not pausing for a second. It's not working. Chest compressions alone won't save him. Midnight's voice grew strained with frustration. Her quirk wasn't meant for healing, and she was running out of options. Cardiac arrest. A young voice broke through the tension, catching Midnight's attention. A slender shadow appeared beside her, cast by the morning light. I think I might be able to help, Miss Hero. Check my reading list. New fics are out now, check out my profile, reading list to read. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 4. Rules and Trash. What are you doing? Before Midnight could fully process what was happening, Kaminari had already crouched down and stretched his hand toward the old man's chest. In the next second, her white, slender hand tightly grabbed his wrist. Kid, what do you think you're doing? Her brows furrowed in frustration, and her eyes flashed with disbelief. A child's interference during such a critical moment. It was outrageous. However, Kaminari didn't react angrily. Instead, he looked up at her, his eyes calm and full of sincerity. With a quiet but confident voice, he began to explain. You just said the old man's heart stopped because of cardiac arrest, and your chest compressions and CPR aren't working, right? That means he needs a stronger shock to revive him. So, stop talking. Just listen to me, Kaminari interrupted her, knowing they didn't have a second to waste. My quirk acts like a defibrillator. My hands can generate the right kind of electricity to restart his heart. As he spoke, he let a small spark of golden electricity dance between his fingers, proving his point before it quickly faded. Midnight hesitated for a second, feeling the faint static between them. The sensation made her instinctively pull back her hand, starting to believe him. But you don't have a hero license. According to the regulations, you're not allowed to. Before she could finish, Kaminari had already placed his hands on the old man's chest, focusing intently. Midnight could only stand by, her heart pounding as she watched the young boy defy the rules, hoping his gamble would pay off. Though she was deeply unsettled by Kaminari's actions, it wasn't just because he disobeyed her. What truly frustrated her was how reckless he was, stepping in where he had no legal right to act. Regulations were there for a reason, after all. Whether or not the old man survived, Kaminari would still face serious consequences. The law didn't care if the outcome was good or bad, breaking the rules was breaking the rules. But now that he'd begun, all Midnight could do was watch. She silently prayed he knew what he was doing, though she was already planning on teaching him a lesson afterward. He needed to understand the weight of responsibility, the importance of laws and rules. That's what it meant to be a hero. On the other hand, Kaminari was entirely focused on the task at hand. He carefully controlled the electricity coursing through his body, sending small, precise shocks directly to the old man's heart. This technique, which he called electrotherapy, was something he had developed himself, inspired by the thunder-based abilities of the character Enel from One Piece in his previous life. The concept was simple: use fine control over his electric current to act as a defibrillator, stimulating the heart back into rhythm. When Kaminari first started training his quirk, he'd never thought about learning such delicate techniques. Like any kid, he'd imagined powerful, flashy moves with big effects, stuff like 100,000 volts, Thunder Dragon's Roar, or God's Judgment. But reality had thrown cold water over his ambitions. While his quirk allowed him to generate electricity, Kaminari quickly realized he couldn't control large amounts of current at all. Once it left his body, it scattered wildly into the air, losing energy almost immediately. The idea of shaping or directing his electricity seemed impossible. He couldn't even guide the current in a straight line. Worse yet, the risk of accidentally injuring others was high. The uncontrolled nature of his power made it far too dangerous to use around people. This was the first of his two major limitations. Overcoming it would require intense training to master precise control. But the second flaw was even more debilitating and far harder to fix. Whenever Kaminari pushed his output beyond a certain threshold, his brain would short-circuit. He'd lose consciousness and, for a while, turn into nothing more than a grinning idiot, only able to give a thumbs up and giggle. Why did he know this so well? Well, let's just say he'd learned the hard way. In the end, Kaminari had to give up on the dream of massive electrical discharges. Instead, he turned his attention to honing his fine control over his quirk, drawing inspiration from anime techniques that focused on precision rather than raw power. 9 years of relentless training had paid off. Now, he could create complex three-dimensional shapes, like a small Pikachu, out of thin strands of electricity. This was proof of how far his microcontrol had advanced. It was also the reason he'd had the confidence to step in and perform defibrillation today. He wasn't acting out of arrogance, he was relying on years of hard work. The crowd surrounding them had fallen silent, holding their breath as Kaminari worked. It felt as though even the birds had stopped singing, waiting to see what would happen. And then, suddenly, the old man's chest rose. He's breathing. Oh my God, his heart is beating again. Thank goodness. The crowd erupted in cheers, their excitement palpable. Some of the older women even had tears in their eyes as they watched the miracle unfold. At the same time, the wail of a distant ambulance echoed through the park, but nobody cared about that anymore. Their attention was entirely on the blonde boy, who stood up slowly, looking both relieved and exhausted. Kid. Do you realize what you've done? As the others praised him, Midnight stepped forward, her voice cold and angry. You broke the law. You're a middle school student, aren't you? If this gets recorded in your file, you'll have a hard time getting into any high school, no matter how good your grades are. Do you understand how serious this is? Kaminari glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Does it really matter? He asked casually. Would you have preferred to let the old man die just because of some regulation? He stepped forward, his eyes meeting Midnight's, his tone calm but firm. Would you give up your future just to follow the rules, even if it meant losing someone's life? Midnight's anger faltered. She stared at him, the confidence in his expression catching her off guard. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Rules. Kaminari chuckled softly as he prepared to leave. He had his graduation ceremony today, and he didn't want to be late. But before he walked away, he turned back one last time. Yeah, people who break the rules are trash. But, he paused, his voice firm. People who don't value life are worse than trash. With that, he headed toward the subway station, leaving behind a stunned silence. Even Midnight, her mouth slightly open, was speechless. His words had struck deeper than she expected. Wait. Her voice rang out again, stopping him in his tracks. What's your name? Tell me your name. Kaminari paused, glancing back over his shoulder. Kaminari. Kaminari Denki from Tanabori no. 1 Junior High. If you want to call the police and arrest me, that's where you'll find me. And with that, he disappeared into the distance. Check my reading list. New fics are out now, check out my profile, reading list to read. 20 comments 0 vote. Chapter 5, Kaminari. Kaminari Denki. The female hero muttered the name under her breath, curling her lips in a mock show of disdain. You little brat, if I really wanted to catch you, do you think I'd let you get away? PFF'd. But for some reason, she suddenly giggled, her voice playful. But those childish words. I don't mind them at all. Then, in a louder voice, she turned to the gathered crowd of residents. Everyone, listen up. I've decided to temporarily act as that boy's guardian under my authority as a pro-hero. That means I, Midnight, am responsible for any consequences of his quirk use today. According to the law, minors or student heroes without a license could only use their quirks under the supervision of a guardian, be it a parent, teacher, police officer, or hero. Professional heroes, under special circumstances, could take on that role temporarily, but they also had to shoulder all the responsibility for whatever happened. That's why most pro-heroes avoided it. Minors were unpredictable, and things could easily spiral out of control. The crowd nodded in understanding. They were all adults and knew the complexities of the situation, so everyone quietly accepted Midnight's declaration with kind smiles. Meanwhile, Kaminari, completely unaware of what had transpired, had already returned home, showered, and was getting ready for school. He stood at the door in his white school uniform. Today was the graduation ceremony, so it would likely be the last time he'd wear this uniform that had accompanied him for the past 3 years. Here, your guitar. His mother, still young and vibrant, handed him a bright yellow guitar case, smiling as she watched him step out of the house. She then slipped on her carefully chosen blue and white crystal heels. Yes, his mother was accompanying him to school today. She'd sit with the other parents in the audience and watch him perform on stage. There would be performances by other students too, of course, but in Kaminari's mind, his mother was coming specifically to see him, not anyone else. I think this is the first time Mom will see me perform live. Kaminari glanced at her, smiling as they walked together. His mother tucked a stray lock of black hair behind her ear and nodded seriously. So, son, make sure you don't embarrass yourself in front of everyone. Don't worry. Your son's going to be the most handsome one there today. Maybe it was because he'd lived a plain, ordinary life in his previous world, but now Kaminari had a deep desire to live boldly. In this life, he wanted to stand out, to shine like lightning across the sky. Tanabori Junior High School was just 2 stops away on the subway, practically next door. It took only 5 minutes to get there. When Kaminari and his mother arrived near the school, they saw groups of boys and girls in their uniforms, their youthful faces full of excitement as they walked alongside their parents. Needless to say, these were his fellow graduates. But when Kaminari, carrying his guitar case, appeared at the school gates, the atmosphere changed in an instant. Ah! It's Kaminari. Look, it's really him. He's as cool as ever. Mom. Dad. Look, that's Kaminari. Isn't he handsome? Isn't he just the coolest? Oh, that's the kid who's been top of the class for 3 years straight. He really does look impressive. Hey. We're not talking about his grades. Kaminari's mother blinked in surprise, taking in the scene around her. She looked at her son with raised eyebrows. Are you really this popular? The way those kids were looking at him, it was like they were staring at a celebrity. It's not a big deal, Kaminari said with a shrug, though inside he felt a spark of excitement and pride. It wasn't every day he got to show off in front of his mom. With the crowd's eyes on them, mother and son made their way toward the school auditorium. Once inside, they had to part ways. Kaminari needed to head backstage to check his equipment and get ready to stand with his classmates. And, of course, because of the widespread existence of quirks, there were plenty of students in the school who didn't look entirely normal. Kaminari was already used to seeing people with unique appearances, horns, tails, or other unusual features, but it didn't faze him anymore. The ceremony started with the usual formalities, speeches from the principal, teachers, and various student representatives. The school song played softly in the background, and one by one, students were called to the stage to receive their diplomas. The only moment that really stood out. The thunderous applause that filled the auditorium when Kaminari's name was called and he walked across the stage. After the diplomas were handed out, the stage was cleared for the performances. This was the highlight of the day, and everyone had been looking forward to it. The students who had spent the past 2 months preparing their acts performed with a mix of nerves and excitement. Each act was met with enthusiastic applause, and the performers, their faces flushed with pride, hugged each other as they returned backstage. Kaminari watched from behind the scenes, clapping along with everyone else. He wasn't trying to act cool, he genuinely appreciated their efforts. His own performance was up next, so he opened his guitar case and slung his electric guitar over his shoulder. Though his act was the finale, he wanted to familiarize himself with the instrument and make sure everything was in place. The music teachers had already set up the speakers and effects for him, so all that was left was for him to play. The guitar itself was a striking piece, with sharp, angular edges shaped like a bolt of lightning. The body was black with gold thunder patterns, but what stood out the most was the cute little Pikachu sticker on the front. Of course, this world didn't have Pokemon. Kaminari had drawn Pikachu himself and turned it into a custom sticker. He felt an odd connection to the character, something about Pikachu's electric powers resonated with him. This guitar was a special gift from his father, given to him 5 years ago. It was expensive, worth about 2 months of his father's salary. Kaminari cherished it, and he had even given it a name, Pikachu. Lost in his thoughts, Kaminari was startled when one of the teachers tapped him on the shoulder. Kaminari, you're up next. Already. He was surprised by how quickly the time had passed, but he smiled and thanked the teacher. With his guitar slung across his body, he stepped up to the ready position, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations on his shoulders. Kaminari's going to play that song, right? Yeah. That song. There's a music video online and a single on MTV, but hearing it live is going to be amazing. Ha. You probably know all the lyrics by heart, don't you? Come on, like you're any different. I bet you've got Pikachu pillows all over your room. Kaminari smiled to himself as he overheard the excited whispers from the audience. His classmates had been buzzing about his performance for weeks. As the host called his name, the energy in the room shifted. And now, the final performance of the day, the one you've all been waiting for. As soon as he said that, the crowd erupted into thunderous cheers. The sound was so deafening that even those backstage could clearly hear what they were chanting. Kaminari. 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 Alright, let's welcome the performance by the superstar of Tanabori no 1 Junior High. Kaminari Denki. Only My Railgun. The final shout came from the entire audience in unison, their voices merging into one. Check my reading list. New fics are out now, check out my profile, reading list to read. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 6, Discovery. The school's auditorium stage wasn't particularly large, yet the teachers had gone to great lengths to create the best atmosphere for Kaminari's performance. They replaced all the curtains with thick, black, light-blocking fabric. As the lights dimmed and the entire auditorium was engulfed in darkness, the teachers, students, and parents remained calm. After all, this kind of setup was quite common here, and everyone was familiar with the process. Snap. The moment the colorful spotlights above the ceiling converged on the center of the stage, Kaminari was already standing there, an electric guitar slung casually around his waist. He flashed a warm smile at the crowd as he gripped the microphone stand. Several music teachers, serving as backup musicians, held bass guitars or sat behind the drum set, their presence complementing Kaminari like stars surrounding the moon. But instead of bursting into cheers, the students waited in an expectant hush, as if collectively holding their breath for what was to come. Without saying a word, Kaminari strummed the pick across the guitar strings, launching into a rhythmic intro with practiced ease. The familiar melody swept through the auditorium like a wave, instantly igniting the crowd. Deafening cheers and screams erupted, their energy turning the entire venue into a boiling cauldron of excitement. Let go. A dream carved in my heart. The future can be forsaken too. The moment he belted out the opening line, his powerful voice resonated alongside the fierce accompaniment. It felt like the air itself burst apart, the combined shouts of the students surging like waves, crashing against the walls and filling every corner. This was their idol, someone who walked the same halls, shared the same classes, and was, incredibly, one of their own. The sense of pride, connection, and the quality of the music left a lasting impression on everyone present. Kaminari wasn't just another talented student. He was a symbol of excellence in their midst. I don't recognize boundaries. Meaningless. This power shines like light. After Kaminari finished the first half of the song with an almost feverish tempo, the crowd finally joined in as he reached the line, "If the path I've walked can only be retraced." Together, they sang along, a chorus of hundreds merging into one voice. Might as well destroy everything here. A town that's fallen into the abyss of darkness. How long can people keep fighting? Even Kaminari's mother, who was sitting among the audience, was astonished. The sheer scale of the students' response left all the parents in the guest section wide-eyed and open-mouthed. What on earth was happening? Was this really just a junior high school graduation ceremony? It felt more like a rock star's cross-country tour than an ordinary school event. Previously, they had heard their children rave about how cool Kaminari was, how well he could sing, and how popular he was at school. They hadn't taken it too seriously at the time. After all, parents usually cared more about his academic performance and his impressive feat of being the only student from Tanaben First Junior High to apply for UA High School's hero course and pass the written exam. But now, witnessing this firsthand, they realized just how exceptional this boy was. In Japanese society, test scores aren't the only measure of a student's worth. They aren't even the most important factor. What truly matters is the student's overall character and achievements. However, despite being so well known within the school, Kaminari wasn't a household name beyond its walls. 2 years ago, he had posted a music video online where he played and sang, "Only My Railgun," on his electric guitar, gaining some attention for the quality of the performance and his good looks. But he was still just a small-time singer, with songs that were better known than his face. The performance ended before long. The song was only a little over 4 minutes. As the last note hung in the air, it signaled not only the end of the performance but also the closing of Kaminari's 3-year middle school journey. What lay ahead was the more demanding world of Hero High School, where a multitude of challenges related to becoming a hero awaited him. In this world, the hero circle is the pinnacle of achievement. Now that Kaminari had been given a second chance at life, there was no way he'd let it pass without aiming for the top. After the ceremony concluded, Kaminari and his mother left the campus together, accompanied by the well wishes of friends and classmates. Perhaps feeling a touch of nostalgia, Kaminari glanced back at the school's name, Tanabori number 1 junior high, one last time. Then he turned around and continued down the path to his future with his mother by his side. UA. High school, I can't wait. But why did that female teacher come to mind? As soon as they arrived home, his overjoyed mother announced that the family would have a grand dinner to celebrate, barbecue. Kaminari certainly had no complaints. In fact, he welcomed the idea. He was still growing, and some extra protein couldn't hurt. But with some time to spare before his father got off work, Kaminari changed out of his school uniform, carefully folding it before placing it in the closet. He then hung his guitar bag on the wall. Today was February 6th, and there were still 20 days until the practical exam at UA High School. He had already prepared as much as he could, so for the next few days, he would allow himself to rest and recharge, ensuring he was in peak condition when the time came. Changing into casual clothes, Kaminari flopped onto his soft bed. It's worth noting that his pillow and blanket were both adorned with Pikachu designs, and a Pikachu figure model sat on his computer desk. He hadn't bought these items himself. Considering he could draw Pikachu by heart, there wasn't much point in buying merchandise. It was all made at home. Before he knew it, his eyelids grew heavy, his breaths became deep and even, and he drifted into sleep. The excitement from earlier had taken its toll. The Pikachu clock on the wall quietly ticked away until nearly 5 in the afternoon, when the wooden door to his room suddenly creaked open. Hey, still sleeping? A middle-aged man with thick blonde hair entered. When he saw his son dozing, he reached out and flicked Kaminari's forehead with 2 fingers. Crackle. But as soon as his fingers touched Kaminari's hair, a bright spark of electricity shot out, causing the man to quickly pull his hand back. Oddly, silver-white sparks crackled from his fingertips but fizzled out before forming a complete current. Dad, seriously. Kaminari rubbed his forehead, looking at his father with a mixture of irritation and helplessness. I've told you countless times, it's dangerous. My self-defense currents are stronger than your low-level lightning immunity can handle. Kaminari's father also had an electrical quirk, which was why the doctors had anticipated Kaminari's abilities and taken extra precautions for lightning protection. But quirks have levels. His father's quirk was a lower level, static, ability, capable only of releasing tiny amounts of static electricity that could cause a tingling sensation at best. He also possessed a passive trait common to lightning-based quirks, partial immunity to electricity. This is similar to those with fire or ice-based quirks, who are generally resistant to burns or frostbite. However, this resistance had its limits. With enough output, even they could get hurt. Haha, my bad, his father chuckled sheepishly, rubbing his slightly numb fingers. I didn't expect your currents to be that strong. His tone turned serious, but is it because your quirk level is naturally high, or have you been training in secret? Well, check my reading list. New fics are out now, check out my profile, reading list to read. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 7. Small goals, big dreams. Ha ha ha. Seeing his handsome son looking slightly embarrassed after being teased, Kaminari's father couldn't help but feel a bit smug. So, you figured it out, huh? Realizing his father was just joking around, Kaminari relaxed, got out of bed, and asked curiously, when did you notice? His dad put on a mock-serious expression, son, never underestimate the wisdom of adults. Especially since you've chosen the path of becoming a professional hero. You'll definitely face dangerous people in the future, so you should never let your guard down. His father's tone was a mixture of concern and expectation. It was clear he was worried for Kaminari's future and didn't want to see the tragedy of a parent outliving their child. Okay, Dad, I promise I'll take your advice to heart. Even though Kaminari knew he was only aiming for UA high school to get the hero license, with no actual intention of pursuing a career as a professional hero, he understood his father's worries. There was no need to argue, so he just went along with it. With a grin, he stepped forward and hooked his arm around his father's, his tone playful. I'm starving. I can't wait to eat some of that delicious barbecue. You little glutton. Fine, his dad said, shaking his head and smiling. He could only hope his son had really taken his words seriously because they were extremely important. Your mom and I are ready to go. We've just been waiting for you. With that, the family of three happily made their way down to the apartment's parking lot, not wasting any time. Without further ado, they piled into the car and headed to a well-known barbecue restaurant in downtown Saitama. It was a popular spot, though the prices were a bit above the average. As the car cruised through the city, Kaminari, seated in the back with his mom, glanced idly out the window, watching the scenery roll by. His attention was particularly drawn to the professional heroes patrolling the streets in their unique, sometimes flamboyant costumes. Seeing those so-called heroes, he found himself drifting into thoughts about the nature of hero society. With nothing else to occupy his mind at the moment, he indulged in some reflection. His opinion hadn't changed from over a decade ago. These professional heroes, who had essentially become state-employed civil servants, were more like specialized police officers. Funded by the government, they carried out duties like patrolling, arrests, disaster relief, and maintaining public order. If that didn't make them akin to policemen, what did? Some might argue that heroes are also ordinary people who need to make a living, so it's fair for them to be paid for their work. While this was a reasonable perspective, Kaminari felt there was a flaw in such reasoning. Becoming a hero should not be primarily about the money. If someone thought about how much they could earn from a rescue or whether the government would compensate them before taking action, then their motivations were questionable. If they were rescuing people solely for the reward, could they truly be considered heroes? In Kaminari's view, such individuals were perhaps better described as good people, rather than genuine heroes. What is a hero, really? A hero is someone who acts selflessly, who risks their life for the well-being of others and the nation, enduring hardships without hesitation. A hero is someone who makes great sacrifices and contributions, even to the point of giving their life. The title of hero is the highest honor a society can bestow upon its members, and it should carry significant weight. It shouldn't be handed out lightly, not for minor deeds like rescuing a stray dog. At best, those people could be called kind-hearted individuals. If anyone could be labeled a hero simply for small acts of kindness, then what would that make those who sacrifice their lives for their country? Wouldn't it cheapen the sacrifices of true heroes? Thinking further, Kaminari pondered on the concept of compensation. A person with the ability to be a so-called professional hero, someone who could handle dangers far beyond what regular people could face, should not be dependent on the hero's salary to survive. Wasn't it possible for them to find other ways to make a living? Take examples from other worlds. Spider-Man was a journalist while working as a hero, and Superman held a job at a company. Characters like Wonder Woman, The Flash, and the Fantastic Four all balanced hero work with other occupations. While those were fictional cases, Kaminari knew that in this world, many heroes did the same. Plenty of professional heroes held one or more other roles in society. For instance, UA high school's teachers were all professional heroes, yet they also served as educators. Midnight, the R-rated hero, wasn't just a teacher. She was also a celebrity, frequently appearing on TV due to her stunning looks. Then there was Present Mike, who taught at UA while also working as a popular radio DJ. Smintos ran a construction company, while Mt. Lady was a top model and a prominent figure in the entertainment industry, with multiple endorsement deals. Death Arms ran a martial arts training gym. There were countless examples of professional heroes who found ways to integrate into society beyond just hero work. In Kaminari's opinion, this demonstrated that anyone qualified to be a professional hero could find other means to support themselves. If a person couldn't even manage that, what made them think they were capable of handling the dangers associated with being a hero? Therefore, Kaminari genuinely believed that the current system of professionalizing heroes was unnecessary. If the government needed these roles to be formalized, wouldn't it make more sense to incorporate them into the police force? The term, hero, itself seemed almost superfluous under such circumstances. Interestingly, his middle school history teacher had once explained that when quirks first started appearing, law enforcement chiefs had insisted that police officers refrain from using quirks during duty. To Kaminari, this reasoning seemed baffling. How did using quirks contradict law and order? Aren't quirks, at their core, tools wielded by humans? Besides, he was pretty sure that militaries worldwide had their share of powerful quirk users. However, it wasn't as if he harbored any extreme opinions about it. He was just airing out some idle complaints. Kaminari did hold onto a personal principle, though. Even if he obtained a hero license, even if he found himself in situations where he could save others, he would never accept the so-called hero remuneration from the government. To put it simply, he wasn't going to profit from the hero title, nor did he feel he needed to. Helping others shouldn't automatically be equated with being a hero, just like he didn't consider every patrolling professional hero to be the real deal. To him, the term, professional hero, was just a unique job title, similar to being a ninja or a pirate. It was merely a profession, nothing more. That being the case, his goals were clear. He was an entertainer, a star who helped others as a hobby. The hero license was just a small step towards achieving something bigger. As for his ultimate ambition, how about becoming the world's top lightning-based quirk user? That didn't sound bad at all. Heh, heh. As Kaminari imagined a bright future, the corners of his mouth curled up. His mother, sitting beside him, couldn't help but wonder what her son was so happy about. Just then, the car pulled to a stop. His father in the driver's seat unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door, announcing, "All right, we're here. Check my reading list. New fics are out now, check out my profile, reading list to read." 16 comments 0 vote. Chapter 8, The Bloody Iron Fist. You know, it feels like forever since we last had barbecue here, Kaminari remarked, a hint of nostalgia in his voice as he followed his parents into the restaurant. When exactly had it been since their last family outing to this place? He still remembered the owner vividly, not because of the food, but because his appearance was so startling. The man was nearly a spitting image of Saitama from One Punch Man. Seeing someone who looked that much like a famous manga character had definitely left an impression on Kaminari. However, it seemed the owner wasn't around today. Kaminari glanced around and felt a small pang of disappointment. Yeah, it must have been a few years, his dad agreed as he spoke to the hostess and then followed her to their table. The last time we were here was when I resigned and we celebrated the successful founding of our family's company. Please, take a seat here, the waitress, who looked like a college student working part-time, said with a polite smile as she led them to an empty table. Thank you, Kaminari's dad replied, sitting across from him, while Kaminari and his mom took seats on the opposite side. Being the one who knew the menu best, his dad took charge of ordering. The family had similar tastes when it came to barbecue. We'll start with 2 servings of grade 3 Osaka beef tenderloin, 2 glasses of ice water, and a Coke, he said, opting for plain water since he had to drive. Kaminari, of course, got his usual Coke. By the way, Dad, how's the company doing? Kaminari asked casually as he leaned back, listening to the music playing softly in the restaurant. The DJ responsible for the playlist was none other than UA's teacher, Present Mike, Japan's top voice quirk user. It's doing great. His dad replied enthusiastically. He never hesitated to discuss the company with Kaminari since its success was, in part, thanks to his son. Pikachu merchandise is selling really well, and your Railgun song is steadily climbing in popularity on MTV. Actually, he continued, the song has just reached number 7 on the top list. We're also seeing some decent revenue from the various copyrights. Overall, things are looking up. Kaminari nodded in satisfaction. Even without the support of the Pokemon franchise from his previous world, Pikachu's iconic design was still making waves in this one. It wasn't the cultural phenomenon it had been in his past life, but it was enough to sustain a small company and keep his family financially comfortable. But, his dad hesitated, I think our product lineup is a bit too limited. Pikachu's great, but it would be better if we had a few more characters like it. No problem. I'll draw a few more when I get some free time, Kaminari said without hesitation. While he had no intention of becoming a full-time manga artist, he could definitely add a few more iconic characters like Squirtle or Charmander to expand the company's offerings. And then there's the matter of new songs. Kaminari didn't say this out loud but kept it in mind. He enjoyed singing far more than drawing, though he'd have to choose his next track carefully. Let Go. A Dream Engraved in My Heart. You can also ignore the future. At that moment, the familiar intro to his song suddenly filled the restaurant, followed by his own voice coming through the speakers. Surprisingly, it was his mom who reacted first. "Hey, isn't this your song?" she asked, recognizing it instantly since she had just watched Kaminari perform at his solo concert earlier that day. "Yeah, it is," both Kaminari and his dad replied in unison. His dad, especially, had heard the song so many times due to work that he was nearly sick of it. Yet, it also highlighted a peculiar situation. Kaminari's music was popular, but he himself wasn't. Despite his song playing, no one in the restaurant seemed to realize that the artist was sitting right there. Kaminari didn't mind, though. He was still a student, and there would be plenty of time to worry about fame when he was older. As long as he continued to release high-quality music, the recognition would come eventually. Just then, the food arrived. The young waitress deftly handled the meat with a pair of clean spatulas, grilling the beef on the iron plate. Her movements were smooth and efficient, cutting the meat along its natural grain. There was a certain artistry to the traditional Japanese style of cooking, and Kaminari couldn't help but appreciate the show. All done. Now, you can add any seasonings you prefer. It's best enjoyed right away, the waitress said with a polite bow before moving on to prepare the next batch of beef. Kaminari was used to the routine. He took the black pepper his mom handed him and sprinkled it lightly over the sizzling meat. Then, he picked up a piece with his chopsticks and savored the rich aroma before placing it in his mouth. As mentioned earlier, their family shared similar tastes, and black pepper was a favorite for barbecued meat. But just as the three of them were settling in to enjoy the meal, a news report suddenly interrupted the background music on the restaurant's TV. This is NHA News. We are broadcasting an urgent update. Just an hour ago, police on patrol discovered the remains of professional hero Plastique on Okasa Street. Based on preliminary investigations, authorities suspect the notorious hero killer. The Saitama City Police Department, in cooperation with professional heroes, has launched a full-scale search for the criminal. The police chief has also issued a warning advising professional heroes not to act alone for the time being and urging citizens to limit their outings until further notice. The chief, Yasuhei Yanai, assures the public that every effort is being made to bring the hero killer to justice and restore peace to Saitama City. The broadcast ended as abruptly as it began, and the usual program resumed. But now, no one in the restaurant was paying attention to the show. Instead, whispers filled the air as customers discussed the sudden appearance of a super criminal in their city. It wasn't surprising. The thought of a nationally wanted criminal who had murdered over a dozen professional heroes lurking nearby would unsettle anyone. The hero killer, pretty straightforward name, Kaminari mused, taking a sip of his coke. Looks like no matter what world you're in, there will always be villains like this. Still, he had no intention of doing something reckless, like tracking down the killer to play hero. He'd just gotten a second chance at life and wasn't about to throw it away. He was only 15, after all. This was clearly a job for the professionals. But just as Kaminari was lost in thought, a passionate voice rang out from a nearby table. "Dad. I'm going to become the best hero, and I'll catch all these bastards who harm people. If I meet this hero killer, he'll get a taste of my iron fist. Check my reading list. New fics are out now, check out my profile, reading list to read. 5 comments 0 vote.